President Biden's polling numbers should be deeply troubling to the White House and the Democratic Party. According to a recent Quinnipiac poll, his approval rating has hit a low of 33%. That matches the lowest low Quinnipiac ever found for Trump. What does this mean for the future of Joe Biden's presidency, his agenda, the midterm elections? To help us understand all this, Amy Walter joins us. She is the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report. Amy, pleasure to have you on.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
So let's first deal with Biden and the popularity. Whatever the exact numbers are, they're very low. And what I'm trying to figure out is what do you think explains this? And can we start by just parsing through, there are essentially three groups of people, right? Democrats, independents, and Republicans. Where has he cratered?
Right. So the unfortunate news for President Biden is that he's not doing well with any of those groups. The group that should be easiest for him to do well in, especially in this really polarized era we live in, is among Democrats. I mean, he came into office with almost uniform support from Democrats, and now he's dropped, it depends on which poll you're looking at, maybe down to 15 or more points with Democrats. They still like him. They just don't love him in the way that they did at an earlier part in his tenure. The bigger problem for the president right now, though, I'd argue, is with independent voters who, again, he started off with pretty decent ratings from them, but over the course of the late summer and into the fall, they've really fallen away from him. They disapprove of the job he's doing much more than they approve of it. Getting your partisans back, right? Getting the people who are on your team back in the fold is a lot easier to do than trying to win back people who who aren't necessarily on your team, but we're willing to give you a benefit of the doubt at the beginning, but now start to question whether they should still stick with you and still think you're doing a good job.
And I assume Republicans hated him before and they hate him now.
Right. And yes, we didn't talk about the final, but the Republican, it's not just that they don't like him. That's not surprising. The intensity with which they dislike him has also increased. And again, more ominously for Democrats and for the president is the fact that they are much more excited, enthusiastic about showing up to vote than Democrats. That's a reversal from where we were, say, in 2018, when you couldn't keep Democrats from the polls. They were raring to get out and vote really essentially against Donald Trump.
So what do you think explains this? Because Biden is a genial guy. He's pretty mainstream, and he has passed two very large pieces of legislation, and $1 trillion infrastructure bill. We've been waiting for 20 odd years for this, the COVID relief bill. And when you poll most of the key aspects of those bills, they're pretty popular. So to me, at least, this does present something of a puzzle.
Right. So I think you have to go into the mindset now for just a traditional regular voter who is somebody who's not spending a whole lot of time following politics, thinking about politics. They pretty much have a low opinion anyway of Washington and people who work in Washington. What they're looking for is what's going on right now in my own life, and how are people whose job it is to be public servants, how are they making it better or worse? And what I hear in focus groups is just a feeling of a sort of malaise. People say that they're disappointed or they're anxious or they're frustrated. They feel as if, right, we're still sort of trapped in this COVID cycle. We can't seem to break out of it, and continues to impact everything from childcare to schools to what's available on the shelves. Inflation is a real problem, and it's pinching people's pockets significantly. So I think at its core, Fareed, what happened was over the course of the spring and the summer of 2021, you had voters looking at a president who seemed to be fulfilling all of those things he said he would do as president, right? But then the summer came, and the summer brought a dose of really harsh reality. It was like a real punch in the gut, right? You get the Delta variant coming and really disrupting all those plans for COVID to be over. inflation really starts to hit, obviously the pullout in Afghanistan and the fallout there, and voters started to look now and say, well, the guy that we thought was going to be in charge of taking care of the staffer, who was the competent one, suddenly isn't looking so competent anymore. And once you lose voters on a question of competency, it's hard to get them back until you can prove that you are able to, to handle just the basic stuff.
Amy Watters, good to have you on.
Thank you so much.